Tonight, human rights activists decry a deal between the US and Canada that would turn back asylum seekers from Roxham Road. Advocates say the move will make them take riskier routes. And India's manhunt for the Khalistan movement leader enters its second day, shutting down internet and mobile services and arresting several dozen of his supporters. Canadian advocacy groups are calling India out for human rights violations. Later in the show, a look at how Muslims in northern Canada fast during Ramadan. A conversation with Brother Abdul Karim Diakite from the Islamic Society of Nunavut.
And the other challenge that people face living here in Iqaluit is things like the supply of halal meat, the supply of even dates.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Saamiyah Syed. The US and Canadian governments have reportedly reached an agreement to stop migrants from entering Canada through an unofficial border crossing between the two countries. According to local media, the deal is an update to the 2002 Safe Third Country Agreement, which allowed arrivals to apply for asylum in the first safe country they reach, be it the US or Canada. Under the new accord, migrants trying to enter Canada through Roxham Road would be stopped and turned back to the US. Around 20,000 people crossed into Canada last year through Roxham Road, an unofficial border crossing between New York State and Quebec. Rights groups are slamming the decision. The Manitoba Islamic Association is inviting non-Muslims to join them for Ramadan celebrations. Alexandria Merciel, co-organizer of the initiative, says she noticed at the opening ceremony of the Winnipeg's Grand Mosque, visitors were often unfamiliar with the Islamic faith. While talking to a media source, Merciel said it is important for us to get to know our neighbors and let them know about us. She says Ramadan is the perfect time to bridge the gap between the communities. The mosque will host a dinner tonight, inviting non-Muslims to break the fast with them. They also encourage non-Muslims to try fasting for a day. The National Council of Canadian Muslims is asking the government to take action against Indian officials who are committing human rights abuses. The news comes after a manhunt for Sikh preacher Amritpal Singh enters its second day after authorities shut off mobile internet across the western state of Punjab in India. According to the media, 78 of his supporters have been arrested. Amritpal Singh has risen to prominence in recent months, demanding the creation of Khalistan, a separate Sikh homeland. Singh has a big international social media following, including in the UK, US, and Canada. Singh's followers in London and San Francisco have vandalized the Indian consulates.
Your own Attorney General says you're breaking the law.
Demonstrators gathered near Downing Street today during a meeting of the Israeli Prime Minister and Britain's Prime Minister to protest against the Israeli government's judicial reforms. Netanyahu pledged yesterday to restore unity in Israel, where divisions have widened over his government's proposed plan. Demonstrators fear the proposed reforms, which would increase the power of politicians over the courts, are a threat to Israeli democracy. Israel's allies abroad have also raised concerns about the overhaul. Tens of thousands of Israelis have protested in Tel Aviv and other cities since the reforms have been introduced, reports Israeli media. Thank you for watching. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or go to our website, muslimnetworktv, to make a donation so that we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad. In the midst of the hustle and bustle of celebrating Ramadan and connecting to the Muslims in our community, we often forget about the other Muslims across Canada who are doing the exact same. But depending on where you live, these celebrations and practices can look quite a bit different. And joining us today from Iqaluit is Brother Abdul Karim Diakite, a spokesperson for the Islamic Society of Nunavut. Welcome, Brother Abdul Karim, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for having me on your show.
Wa alaikum assalam. Brother Abdul Karim, I'd like to begin by asking a little bit about the fasting hours in Nunavut. How do you determine what the fasting hours are? Because the daylight hours are quite extensive.
Alhamdulillah, I live in Iqaluit, the capital city of Nunavut, and this year the fasting hours are not as long as the previous year, just because we're just coming out of winter. So the days are relatively the same as, for example, Ottawa. So we start fasting at 3 a.m. and Maghrib is around 8 p.m. At this time of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the rest of the territory, we do have some territories, the like of Arctic Bay, where they are going into longer days, and the midnight sun, as they call it, where the sun doesn't set. But in Iqaluit, we're okay for now, for this year, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to ask a little bit about how fasting in Ramadan works then in Iqaluit, or even Nunavut more generally. What are some of the challenges that the community faces during Ramadan?
Well, I think the first challenge that the community faced years ago, when Ramadan used to be during the summer, was the long days of fasting. Maghrib used to be close to 11 p.m. and that's a very long time for people to fast. But Alhamdulillah, we were able to do it for those long days. And the other challenge that people face living here in Iqaluit is things like the supply of halal meat, the supply of even dates, the usual things that we need when we're breaking our fast. And the other important thing is really having, like for instance, a Taraweeh prayer, having an imam to come and lead us for those things. So those are some of the challenges that you face fasting and living in Iqaluit.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to touch upon those later on in the interview. But I'd like to ask you now, vice versa to the first question, what are some things that you find easier than while fasting?
Well, one of the things that's easier here, at least right now, is it's still cold, so it's not hot. So the fasting is not as intense as the rest of the country. I mean, we still have snow here. It's not that hot, and the town is small, so you don't have to go for long distances to go from place A to B. So those are some of the really blessing for being here in Iqaluit. And the masjid is relatively very close to everybody's house. We'll say within 5 to 10 minutes drive.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you now, have you always lived in Iqaluit?
No, I haven't always lived in Iqaluit. I moved here in 2011, so 11 years now I've been a resident of Iqaluit.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the Muslim population there. How large is the Muslim community in Iqaluit or even in Nunavut?
Well, I will say in Iqaluit, at least I will say at least 200, and that's really based on the people that I see come and go at at the masjid and my interaction with the people in the community. So roughly that, but we do have Muslims, alhamdulillah, spread out throughout the territory. I visited some communities where I've met some Muslims down there, and alhamdulillah, there are even Inuits that are revert Muslim. At my surprise, I went to one community and I found some Inuits that are Muslims, which was very beautiful to see and very surprising at the same time.
Mhm. And you said that you met many Muslims at the mosque. So I want to ask, was there always a mosque in the community?
No, no, there wasn't. This mosque was built in 2015, and prior to that, we used to meet up in brother's house to pray Jumu'ah, and that was the only prayer we used to offer really. So we will select a brother's house and we'll go there for Friday prayers and so on. The building of the mosque took some time because we had to negotiate with the city in terms of zoning and what's the best option for the Muslim if we were to buy a house and how do I say it? Um, Renovate it to accommodate the Muslim or get a plot. But Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us and has made it easy for us to get a plot, and we built that masjid from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Now, touching on something that you mentioned before, that it's often challenging to find an imam or someone to lead the Tarawih prayers. How is it going right now then during Ramadan? How do the Tarawih prayers look?
Alhamdulillah, I think this year Ramadan was welcome with a lot of joy. Just because it's the first year after 2 years of lockdown with no Taraweeh, with no prayers. So we weren't able to get an imam to come in, but Alhamdulillah, there are some brothers that are leading the Taraweeh prayers. So we're happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you briefly mentioned the pandemic, and so I want to ask, big challenge that we saw here in Toronto is that when our mosque closed down during the pandemic, we found it difficult to stay connected with other Muslims in the community. Did the people or Muslims in Iqaluit face the same? And if so, how did they overcome this?
Oh, yes, I mean the challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic are almost the same everywhere in the world. The same over here when the masjid closed. It was very hard for us to keep in touch, although we do have a WhatsApp group, but the WhatsApp group as well was a bit slow because I think the pandemic did take a lot of hit on people. Some people had to leave to go and join their family and stay with them. But as far as we are concerned, we try our best to stay in touch over WhatsApp, meeting each other when we go to work or out in the street. We see each other. The city is small, although a lot of people weren't going out. There was at least an occasion to meet people when you go outside.
And I guess that's another benefit of living in a small city or a small tight-knit community where you get to meet with everyone on an everyday basis.
Exactly.
So you said that there was a little bit of a supply problem with getting access to dates. So I want to ask, how do you access them now? What are some of the challenges that you've overcome to have access to those?
Alhamdulillah, over the years, I think the community, the territory altogether has been a lot receptive to the Muslims community. It's easy for us. I remember when I was here in 2011, there wasn't, at least I can recall seeing halal meat. We had to talk to the store managers and ask them if they can bring us some halal meat. We asked them if they can bring us some halal yogurt and things like that. And it was a lot of work, but Alhamdulillah, now we're starting to see that most of the managers that are coming here are open to the idea. We see a lot more halal meat, we see a lot more halal stuff, and surprisingly, there was a lot of dates that came out, and just like down south, they put it on display because they knew it was Ramadan. So a lot of us got our dates down there. It is a bit expensive, but Alhamdulillah, this is what we have, and this is what we have to deal with. So we count our blessings. But some of us, like for me, I do also a lot of shipping. So I bring my stuff up by cargo, and I stock I stock my meat, I stock my dates and things like that. So those are your options. Either you buy it here or you ship it, or when you go down, in terms of preparation, you do it.
And I hate to stop you there, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this interview. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had some issues with your internet connection, but we were able to overcome that. And you shared a lot of insight on how the Muslim community in Northern Canada celebrates Ramadan. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. That's it from our Toronto studios tonight. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Canadian Muslim content. Stay safe, and until next time.